Welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I'm joined by Esther Jones, and in this episode we are going to share with you our journeys into unschooling. I'm Heidi Steel, former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 school-aged children who are happy living and learning as they go. We've been unschooling for almost 10 years, and I blog regularly and organise coaching and mentoring services on unschooling, which you can find out more about at liveplaylearn.org. You can also join me on Facebook at Live Play Learn, where I aim to provide daily support and encouragement for unschooling families. So hi Esther, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Heidi, thank you for inviting me.
That's okay. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit maybe about your unschooling journey?
Yeah, sure. So we're a family of 5. We lived in Spain until about a year ago. We moved back to the UK. We're living in East Sussex now. And we have 3 children, 2 boys who are 15 and 13, and a girl who's 8. And their father's Argentinian, and they were all in Barcelona. And our unschooling journey, it's kind of hard to say. It was the journey we were always on. I didn't know it was called unschooling until we were quite far into it, and I came across this term and I thought, oh, that's what we're doing, and that felt great. But in fact, we came to it really, when I think about it, more of a going away from things that we didn't like, that we found this place. So it was really getting away from mainstream education that clearly wasn't really going to work for us, exploring new ways, looking a little bit at homeschooling, and then finally coming to unschooling, which was almost like going back to what we knew was going to work after playing around in the system, trying to find different schools, alternative schools. So so our 2 boys, they attended a very alternative school near Barcelona for about 3 years. There were no sit-down classes. They were free to do as they liked. And it was quite a nice experience in some ways, but there were still lots of things that didn't really work there. They weren't really engaged much in the things that were going on there. Oftentimes they didn't want to be out of the home all day. They had lots of things they liked doing at home. Sometimes they didn't want to go at all. And so finally we took them out, and that's really when we started trying to figure out what we were doing. And that's when we kind of gently found our way into unschooling.
I like the idea of going back to where we felt naturally, use the word naturally. And I always feel unschooling is like returning to like just this natural way of how life should be, like how families should be when they're together, and finding that there's a community of people and an educational philosophy where you fit is really, I was going to use the word comforting, but it's also really empowering for us as well to find a place where other people are living a similar lifestyle to us with similar principles and similar ideals.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, so for us, it was very much a going back to, like I said, what was just naturally living, and didn't feel so disturbed by the way they were supposed to be, the things we were supposed to be doing, that never felt really coherent. So for me, it was really getting back to a coherent way of being that felt authentic. But you're right. So there was this slightly strange time where we were no longer in the mainstream, but we're in Spain, so we didn't know anybody at all really who wasn't at school. Homeschooling is very unusual there. Unschooling is unheard of. So I finally found one other family who are still great friends, but there was no reference point. So it was incredibly comforting to me to come across this term unschooling and to find that there was a whole community out there, even though it was online. And very empowering, but it's an empowering journey. To me, this is just a very empowering journey, which, as I say, began by sort of moving away from things that we knew we didn't like. So trying things and going, oh no, that's just really not working for us. And then finally sort of going full circle almost, I think.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of people come to unschooling in a similar way, in that they find things that aren't working. Or I mean for me it was more that I knew it wouldn't work, because I had been in the school system as a teacher and had my own beginnings of my own sort of disillusionment with the mainstream education system, that when my son came to compulsory school age, I had a really good idea of what life was going to be like for him in school, and I knew that that isn't what I wanted for him. So I sort of had this, I envisaged that that not working, sort of preempted that this was not going to work for us, or particularly for him.
We had a quite similar thing, in that my oldest son, who wasn't diagnosed at the time, quite recently actually, had a diagnosis autistic, and when he was very small, he was clearly, mainstream wasn't going to work. So there was an element of that, even though I didn't have that same idea of what school would be. We did know that there's no way he was going to thrive in a kind of a sit-down class situation where he had to do as he was told. And so there was certainly an element of knowing that we needed something else beyond the system. That took a little while to understand that actually that's what we had to do, that we had to go that far away from it.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates with me, because my second child in particular has a similar diagnosis to your eldest, which again we didn't know at the time when it came to enrolling him in school, but we'd already made the decision with my first child that he wasn't going to go to school, so we were already on that path. But my second child sort of just really confirmed for us that this was a really, really good choice for us as a family, because of my position, I could foresee, he was going to end up being labelled the naughty child, or the child who couldn't do as they were told and wouldn't sit still, and I didn't want that for him, because even at the age of 4, I could see how amazing he was, and that actually being able to sit still at the age of 4 really wasn't it wasn't for him, and it wasn't going to benefit him being made to do that in any way. And so, similar to you, that was sort of a massive confirmation for us that we were doing, that we had made the right choice, because school would not have been a good fit for him at all. I mean, even now, so he's now 12.
Right.
So even now, I couldn't see school being a good fit for him, but unschooling is an incredibly good fit for him, because he's able to do all the things he wants to do, and he's able to do them when he wants to do them, and he's able to do them when he's able to do them. And I honestly think that he, as a result of unschooling, is very aware of his own self, which I think is incredibly valuable. He knows when he needs to take a break. He knows when he needs to take a step back. He has, so that self-awareness.
Absolutely. A huge amount of self-awareness, but I think that comes because they have so much autonomy to choose. Now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. Even autonomy around things like sleep and eating and all those things are the best way to learn what works for you is to try what works for you. And he's amazing. He's had times where he's found sleeping very hard, but now he has ways that he knows he can get his schedule back on track. Huge self-discipline when he wants to do a task. Just really an amazing amount of self-awareness, and also aware of the things that are hard for him. And so he knows, for example, had some social anxiety, and knowing how the things he needs to do to get beyond that, and when he needs to sort of really challenge himself, and when that's too much for him. Amazing. And I think, wow, imagine going out into the world with all of that. And plus the fact that, well, we both have this some knowledge of PDA, and I think PDA children in particular, well, all children, but particularly PDA children, really need that autonomy. Like they are so capable of choosing what is right for them, and they crave it. And I think if they don't have that, they feel very unsure in life. And I just can't imagine him in a school setting. He loves to learn, loves learning, and he's very open to being in small groups. So he's done some groups where he is learning, and he's learning with a teacher, but there's 3 or 4 of them, and they're there by choice, and it's very interactive, and that absolutely suits him. So it's not like, but it's a very specific way that works for him. And the fact that he can also choose that, he knows how he learns, he knows the methods, he knows how he thrives. I just think that's an awful lot to go into adulthood with. And he's 15 now, so he's really seeing himself in the future and what he wants to do and what he wants to study. And it's really fascinating how empowered he feels about himself and his own capabilities. He's tremendously empowered and very gifted in so many things. We get to see all these incredible things he does. And I think if we'd done school, we would have spent many years trying to figure out the things that weren't working, right? And I think it would have been exhausting. I don't even want to think about it, because I think it would have been so detrimental to all of us and to my relationship with him. Having someone telling me the things that we need to work on, the things that he needs to improve, which would have probably been inevitable, I think. So to not have had that, I think is just lovely.
It is fascinating. And I tell you what's really fascinating for me is that, you say he's 15. So, he's a little bit older than my 12-year-old. And he's probably significantly older than some of the children of the listeners that I've got. Yeah. And I think maybe just before I go any further, I might just explain that PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance, and it is part of being autistic. Not all children who are autistic have PDA, but some children, even adults as well, actually, not just children, but some autistic people have PDA. And when they are young children, particularly, it can manifest itself in really challenging ways, particularly when you're the parents, and particularly if you have children in mainstream school, because, like you say, it's all about what should they be doing, what difficulties are they having, how can we support them to engage in a school setting. And also, as you said, they are really good at the autonomy bit. They really know themselves, and they really know how to dig their heels in and say, I am not doing that. Or that manifests itself as anxiety and stress, and that obviously impacts the child greatly. So it's a really complex diagnosis, particularly if you have a child in school. But when you're unschooling and you are able to give them that autonomy, even though from the outside, when they're young, it looks very, very different to schooled children because of the decisions that your child is making. So what's fascinating me after all of that is that at the age of 15, he is doing things that you are witnessing your child doing things that when you look at a young child with PDA, for example, you just can't see how this is all going to come together. You can't envisage that your 5-year-old will possibly ever manage to organize themselves or join in with a group of other people or a teacher. So that's what fascinates me, how this over time, how actually unschooling and allowing them to have autonomy actually allows them to grow into them knowing themselves really well and knowing, right, small groups really work for me, I can do that. I feel comfortable in a situation where so my son feels comfortable in a situation where he's able to connect, particularly over things like Zoom and Discord. Those are his preferences. He's very motivated. My son's very motivated by animals. So, if he can go somewhere where there's somebody who's got pets or cats, those things are going to motivate him. So that's what fascinates me, like, because we don't often get to see how children grow up naturally.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, even when they're 5, 10, 15, they're always looking for what's meaningful to them. And I think once we capture that, then everything they do starts making sense. So I see all three here really working out the world in their own terms. So my 15-year-old, for example, has always been fascinated by politics and economics. It started with Roman emperors, and then it sort of grew from there. My 13-year-old, again, history, economics, geography. So how does the world work? And then my 8-year-old, she's much more about animals, nature, and so on. But so my 15-year-old, going back to him, it's kind of evolved, and these interests have become bigger and bigger and bigger and more important to him. And now, the last year or so, he's clearly thinking, they're always looking at the world and thinking, what's my place in the world? Who am I? How does it work? And who am I in all of this? From when they're tiny. So real life is really important to them. And then I think it's just a natural progression, is that as they grow older, they're thinking, okay, here are the things I like, and this is what I'm interested in, and how do I fit now into the world? How will I move out there? And so he, in the last year, has really, since lockdown, actually, he's done he actually studies a lot. So he is learning a number of languages, several languages, but in his own way, right? So it's fascinating. So it means so he speaks Catalan, because we're in Barcelona, so he speaks Spanish and Catalan, but it's Catalan. He's keeping his Catalan up by watching a satirical political program in Catalan and texting with a friend sometimes. Then he is learning Chinese, but he's learning that he's got a game, he's got 2 apps, he's learning Russian, and he does that by watching a certain program that he likes, and he has the subtitles on, and sometimes he puts the subtitles in Spanish, so to help him with his Spanish. And it's like this huge kind of like crazy kind of thing going on with all these languages. So he's also teaching himself computer programming, coding. So he's he's doing that with an app, and then he's looking forward to, after lockdown, joining a local coding group. So he's just, curiously, he wants to improve in maths, right? So we're also doing maths every day. So we spend about half an hour, 40 minutes doing maths, and that's actually quite hard because we can't find an interesting way to learn maths, like GCSE level maths. So he has a really good grounding in numbers and percentages and fractions, but it's very difficult to find interesting ways to learn long division and trigonometry and things. So we're finding that a little bit testing. But again, because he knows he's interested in engineering and architecture, and he thinks that he probably will need maths, he is asking every day, okay, let's do our maths. And he groans a little bit before, but it's his choice, And if he wants to stop doing maths, we can stop doing maths. So it's quite fascinating. It really is fascinating. But there's this intrinsic motivation that they have. huge intrinsic motivation. I mean, and discipline, actually. So, and it's coming from him. And the thing is, it's coming from him.
Yeah, I love how all these things come together. So this idea that when our children choose something that they want to invest their time in and that they're passionate about, that there's more than one way to learn something. So if my child, for example, wanted to learn a language, in fact, I know because my eldest son wanted to learn French, but he did it in a completely different way to any of the ways that you have that your son is engaging in it. You know, they have this ability to say, like, and they intrinsically know it. They don't articulate and say, this is how I like to learn. You know, they gravitate towards ways. So, you know, if they like reading a book, they'll go and read the books. Or if they want to watch a film and put subtitles on, they'll do that. Or they'll go and get an app, or they could attend a class. You know, they sort of naturally choose the thing that they know is going to fulfill that need for them. But also how these things come together, you know, this idea about intrinsic motivation, you know, they're so motivated once they've got an idea in their head about what they want to do and what their passion is. And sometimes, you know, I just said an idea in their head. Sometimes they don't even get an idea in their head. Sometimes it's just something's put in front of them and they just go, yeah, I want to do that. Let's spend some time doing that. It's not always a massively conscious decision that's what they're setting out to do. Sometimes it's just them following their feet.
Yeah, I mean, often I they blow me away by their knowledge, what they know, and I've never seen them. I don't know where it comes from. You know, these are just things that they've sort of absorbed as they've gone, because they're interested. They're so interested in the world. I think when people think about learning, they think about that kind of learning that happens because you are told to learn. But there's this other learning that happens, which is the learning that every human, you know, we learn. We're human beings. We have to learn, or we would have died out, right? We have to pick up the skills of the people before us and carry on. It's just this natural thing that takes place. And so it's just so fluid. And it just keeps happening, and it's just this huge thing that's happening all day, every day. They don't stop learning. They never stop learning. And whenever they're a little bit of something sort of, you know, enlightens them, they're off on that path, and they found another learning path with no intention whatsoever to have a qualification. They're just not actually interested in that. They want to know because that feels interesting to them and meaningful to them. And I think that's what's so interesting, is they're actually not chasing qualifications. Not right now. I mean, that can certainly come, but when that does come, that will be quite interesting to see how they deal with that too. I think they'll be very intentional.
I wonder if this is a good point to ask how unschooling has impacted your life personally. So, you know, so not just your children or your family, but how has it affected your life?
Yeah, well, hugely. I think it's been an enormous learning process for me. So I think, like many people, at the beginning, it was all about the children and finding an alternative and how they're going to thrive. And then you realize that they just live, they're fine, they're okay, and that you're the problem, right? And everything's fine, but you're getting a little bit nervous or a bit kind of edgy about something, and so it's really allowed me to challenge pretty much everything about parenting, about childhood, and really start unpicking when I felt triggered. Understand why do I feel triggered? Is this someone's because of social expectations, or my children are fine? Why do I feel like this isn't okay? Why do I feel like, we should be doing that? Where's that coming from? What's that voice in my head? So it's allowed me to really unpick all my social conditioning, which is a big piece of work, really, isn't it? But there's a lot of freedom in there. And I think that's taken me quite a while to go through this sort of the deschooling, and then finally think, now I can unschool. Now I can say, hey, you know what? This is meaningful to me, and I'm going to do it in this way. And I don't really care, actually, anymore that it should be like this, or that society says it needs to be like that. Why? And I think the wake-up call for me was realizing that I was concerned about approval or disapproval from something that I don't really care about particularly, that actually I don't necessarily even agree with. So I think for me, it's allowed me to find this new space of going, all right, well, this is coherent, this is authentic, finding in me through my children. It's also been great for just rediscovering what makes me tick, and the understanding that, okay, I'm saying everyone can find what's meaningful to them, everyone engages in what they want, so what about me? We really have to be models in this, I think. So finding that balance, also showing them that these are the things I'm interested in, they matter to me, bringing them, making sure they're in my life. Also understanding that you can't really parent in this way, which is quite intense sometimes, or parent will just be in this way without taking care of yourself. So understanding, what do I need? How do I stay present? How do I stay mindful? You know, so there's this whole really kind of, what's the word, sort of layers and layers and layers of things, of norms, of social pressures and things that I think that you're kind of peeling away and saying, okay, now what's there? So it's been just an amazing journey of discovery, I think, into living in a way that's authentic. That's really been my biggest takeaway. Also because when we really started embracing unschooling, was when I came to the end of running my own business for 20 years. So I was also leaving something which was actually, you know, I'd been a bit of a workaholic for a long time and quite hard on myself. So I had to really go, okay, I need to find another way of being as well. So the two have kind of gone quite beautifully side by side. Yeah, big journey.
It is a big journey, and it's continuous as well. It doesn't seem to end. So, you know, I you know, you and me have both been parents a long time, and, you know, educating our own children a long time, and actually there's still things that maybe trigger me, or I catch myself thinking and I think, well, hang on a minute, where did that come from? Or
right,
you know, so it's like it's a continuous process. It doesn't really stop. And I was thinking about so I was thinking really specifically about when children are small and parents are put under a lot of pressure to get those early years right, because they're told, you know, that's, you know, their formative years, that's when your children are most are developing their brains, you know, the most, and they're making all these connections, and you know, if you get this bit wrong, you know, things like early intervention, that's quite a key word in the education system in England. If you know, getting our children into early years settings so that they can be nurtured and experience real play-based learning with qualified professionals, you know, and making sure they eat right and making sure they sleep. Just, it's a massive pressure on parents, especially of young children. And then, so we're sort of fed this idea that they're going to be damaged for life, or not. They're either going to, you're really setting them up for success for life, or you're going to really damage them for life. And I think, so one of the things that I really had to unlearn was that that's not necessarily true, that children are incredibly adaptable, and if we change the environment that they're in, they too can change and grow. But it also applies to us. We are not set in our ways as adults. You know, it might take work for us to change our behaviors and set patterns, but it is possible. And we as well are on this constant cycle of moving forward, trying better, giving things another go, making mistakes, being gracious to ourselves, and keeping moving forward, because it is possible for us to change things that maybe were habits for a very long time, or impulses that we might have maybe not got on top of, and to change our own behaviours, as well as have a positive impact on our children, that we are, we're not stuck in this way of being. We can evolve, and we can change ourselves.
Well, I think that's almost underpins the whole unschooling experience, is that the parent really has to be open to that. You have to have an openness and say, okay, I'm going to learn. And I think the change happens also. You gain confidence. You let go a little bit at the beginning, don't you? You say, all right, well, okay, let go of bedtimes or computer times, or you let go of what you thought learning would look like. You let go and you go, oh, actually, it's all fine. And day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, your children they've taught themselves how to read, and the maths is fine, or they know so much, and they're clearly very smart, and they're happy, and all of that is really is how the change takes place in us as well. Every time we let go a little bit, it's through practice, I think, right? We change through our practice, saying, all right, I'm not going to intervene now. I'm not going to, and you hold back, and it takes you really have to hold on at the beginning. You have to really resist jumping in where normally you might have jumped in. And then as you go through time, you go, oh yeah, but I'm not going to jump in because I know it's all going to work out fine. And so I think you find yourself changing as you just get more, you acquire more good experience of what you're actually doing. It takes a lot of trust. I think you do need a lot of trust, and I think that's the main thing at the beginning, is trusting that it's all going to be okay. Every time you don't trust, you kind of tense into the situation. You're going to make, you're going to actually make a good situation bad if you're not careful, by assuming that it won't work out, right? So that open-mindedness, willing to change, willing to learn, and more than anything, willing to trust, so you get those experiences back. Yeah.
I think we do also need to extend grace to ourselves as well. So like those moments when we do step in, when we maybe on reflection we shouldn't have, or when we so some of it is a little bit trial and error. So what, okay, if I do this now, is that helpful? Oh no, that wasn't helpful. Step back. And to be a bit gracious with ourselves for making those mistakes, because it's about learning what works for your children, what your children respond to, when do they maybe want you to step in. And some children are really vocal, I think my 6-year-old's very vocal if I step in at the wrong time. She clearly tells me, no, go away, I'm doing it myself. But my eldest is not as vocal, and I pick up on his behaviour, so he will let me intervene or help him when I think I'm being helpful, but he sort of retreats, and it's not me being helpful, it's him stepping back and letting me take over. He lets me take over. So sort of being in tune with our children. And it took me a long time to realize with him that that's what was actually happening. He wasn't finding my assistance
but that's
helpful.
It's really about being in tune. You're absolutely right. What might work one day doesn't work the next day, because people are in a different mood, because the environment's different for whatever reason. There's no one way of doing it. It's really about I think it's really about accompanying and understanding, what does this person need right now? What's the environment they need? Maybe they're fine, maybe they need nothing right now. And that just keeps changing. So if anything, it's all about the relationship, I think, with the child, and sort of understanding them, that they feel empowered to say, oh no, don't need you right now, or whatever it is. So a lot of relationship, and a lot of trial and error, So it's something that happens, that used to happen to us. It doesn't happen quite so much, but it still does happen, which is when someone has an interest or they show a new interest, and this is our own conditioning, where you go, oh, that sounds really good for them. Oh yes, and you get too enthusiastic, right? And then by the next day you've done some research for them, you've found a course they might like, you found the equipment, and they're like, oh no thanks, that's fine, and they back away. And it's because you've kind of like taken over the process, you know, you've taken charge, and it's not yours to take charge of, it's really theirs. And that's when I think we've learned to be quite cautious, and we've realized that when we're over cautious and understanding why we're motivated to do that, what is in it for us that our child takes that interest up, goes to that class, why do we want that so much for them? Is it fulfilling some sort of social norm? You know, so again, questioning yourself, thinking, oh, why am I doing that? Other times, of course, they'll need a lot of accompaniment, companion, you know, through the journey they're on, in which case they may need us to sit with them for an hour, going through, doing whatever that is. So again, just being very aware of where they're at in their journey, and what's needed from us. I think that's the task, isn't it, really? Understanding what's needed and when. Yeah,
we're not making it sound very easy. Not, because sometimes you need to be with them and, you know, walk through, you know, okay, you've got this interest, what do you want to do, and help them access things that they wouldn't be able to access, particularly when they're young, that they wouldn't be able to access without us. And then, like you say, other times we jump in and do all that stuff, and they like run off, like, what are you doing? That's what, and they, you know, they retreat, and that's not what they wanted at all. So that process of really being in tune with our children and being in relationship with them, so that we are maybe not so gung-ho, but maybe make suggestions rather than present a platter of ta-da. You know,
well, I think the thing here is that is understanding our role. So it doesn't sound easy, but actually in some ways it's easier, because our role isn't to direct what they're doing. So I think that sometimes we step in because we're thinking, oh, I'm not doing enough, I need to I need to facilitate more things, but that's actually not where they're at right now. And they are actually on a number of little learning journeys that maybe you're not even aware of. And then suddenly someone comes down and goes, oh, I've just created a map of whatever, I've just done this, this, and this, or whatever it is. They've just done something incredible, and they've been, you know, spent 3 hours on something you had no idea about. And, oh, that's actually what they're doing now. They're not interested in this little thing that I'm looking at, but they're interested in that. So there's so much more going on beyond what I suggest to them.
Were there any ideas that you read about or came across in unschooling or on your unschooling journey that you found particularly tricky, that you really took you a while to implement, or, you know, trust? Was it, you know?
There hasn't been any one particular thing. I think the thing that has been most challenging to me has been understanding my own triggers and why something's triggering me. Or, okay, yes, perhaps there is one thing that was challenging to start with, and this would be for my 15-year-old. PDA, as you rightly said, can look very challenging, and I think, and it can be challenging. And I would say they're not challenging children. If they challenge something in us, they challenge your deepest ideas of what a parent is, of authority, of control. That all falls apart completely. That is just not how you can be in relationship with a child like this. And again, I would say all children, but particularly these ones. I think they're kind of the flag bearers for all children, these children. And they question that, and they will not respond to that. And so being called out on that all the time, was really hard. And getting beyond that idea of, well, you're doing this and that's wrong, and they're the ultimate unschooled child. They really are. Because of the way they will challenge everything. So having to open myself over and over and over to my own personal challenges was really hard. It was really hard and incredibly, I'm going to say, satisfying and so joyful in the end, because you end up with this relationship which is nothing like what you could have had you been saying, no, I'm in charge. This is, and as they grow and they grow into themselves and that relationship matures, it's a really beautiful thing. There's so much trust there. And you still don't get it right all the time. I absolutely don't get it right all the time, but he'll call me out on that, and I will go, okay, yeah, no, I get that, right. And it's just something, it's so hard. So that was probably the hardest part of this for me, and the most necessary part, absolutely, as well.
Yeah, I feel quite privileged actually to have more than one child that does that for me, because I think that enables us to inevitably have these relationships which are just genuinely authentic and deep, and there is no room for me, because these children call you out on it when it happens. There is no room for me to accidentally slip into some form of trying to control them or manipulate them on the sidelines. There is, or even accidentally. There's no room for it whatsoever, because they're there calling you out. And I feel quite privileged to be that parent almost, or to have a child like that, because because it means you can't, there's no room for control at all.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I can't even, I agree. Yeah, you can't even go into by accident something. You just can't do. You just have to be there with what's coming and do the best you can. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when he was small, I had friends who were doing the naughty step and time out and all that kind of thing, which I never was. I never liked any of that, and I wasn't remotely tempted. But I was always amazed that you could actually do that with a child. I didn't understand how they were doing it. And they would she just sits there? She just, it's all beyond me. Not on my radar. But it's nice in a way, because that, you're being challenged at that level. But it makes for either, it makes for huge growth. So I think that getting back to your initial question, the challenge for me was really keeping up with my own growth. I think keeping up with that, and like I say, and he would be the first to say, definitely not perfect, yeah. definitely room to grow, which I totally accept, and that's fine. And I'm sure he'll be patient with me as I do. But that was the main thing. And other things we'd found less hard to let go of. So screen time, bedtime, all those things. We'd always been quite easygoing and just looked for what works for us. So we've never been strict about any of that. We were not really, we didn't parent in a particularly traditional way anyway. So it wasn't quite such the leap that some people find themselves making. Yeah, I
think for us it was those things just made sense. So because I came from a educational background myself, and I had already decided that I sort of trusted this natural developmental process, and that my children were, I wasn't drawn towards sitting them down and doing any sort of structured lessons. I was happy that them playing was fulfilling their learning needs. So because of that, it just, because they had control over those things and autonomy in that area, when we first began reading about unschooling, you know, that was a natural fit for us. And then we read about, well, you could extend that autonomy into, you know, life, you know, the rest of life. It doesn't have to just be about them choosing what they want to learn. It just made sense for us. So it wasn't a particularly difficult thing for us to get our heads around in theory. I think when it came to the practice of it, there was some hiccups, maybe is the best way of putting it. You know, the realities of allowing your children to choose when they use a computer, and the realities of them not going to sleep until they're tired, and then how that impacted the routine that we had previously had. So sort of, you know, so we had to, like you say, peeling back those layers all the time. Well, you know, we had to question, you know, why are we doing this? You know, the rationale behind it, and really question our own, you know, just the idea that adults should have, you know, alone time in the evening, or watch TV together or whatever, and their kids were in bed. You know, that went out the window. That's not happened for for a decade. And we had to question that. We had to kind of weigh up, like, what are we doing? How does this work? Is it what we want? Yes, well, it is.
Been times where I've thought, where I think the balance has gone, where we're not looking at this as a family unit and going, oh, actually that doesn't really work because there are 5 of us in this house, and then I've got these needs, and I need, and then you've got that, and you've got, and so sometimes I think that we definitely have had to look at it and go, well, yeah, it's working for you 2, but not for these 3, or and so, because it doesn't mean everyone does what they want. We have to live together, and so there's so much compromise day to day, and I think it would be very easy to become a bit of a martyr if you're not careful, but that's not right either, because if you're becoming a martyr, then it's just a rubbish role model, you know. Again, like, how do I show them that you have to advocate a little bit for what you need? How do we reach a compromise so that we've all got what we think we need? I think that's a really big part of it. Those are those life lessons that you can learn from living together as 5. Because it's really easy, particularly for the mother, who does tend to be the one, right? Not necessarily, but often it is the mother who's the one at home. It can end up being, you know, if you're tired and bringing no joy to the table, and then it's just not really going to work either, you know, because we're kind of setting the tone, I think, for the day sometimes, right? Your presence is really important. So the quality of your own presence, and that really requires on you taking care of yourself. Have you got what you need? If you're exhausted, you got no time for yourself, feeling a bit resentful, it's just you know, it's just not going to work.
So you mentioned earlier about like self-care, and that's one of the things I think that we need to investigate further for ourselves. Like you say, often it is the mothers who are at home all day with the children, and when you're unschooling, it is a little bit sort of 24/7. There isn't sort of school hours and work hours, and maybe even bedtimes when you've got multiple small children in the house, you know, all on maybe slightly different schedules in terms of how they're sleeping and waking cycles. And I think that one of the things for me that I had to go through was not only recognizing that I had to bring myself to the table and advocate for myself, but that actually I also needed to address for me what my actual needs were, because I think, like many other things in society, we're sort of flooded with these ideas of what it is we need. You know, you need a glass of wine at the end of the day, or you need to go out on the weekend and go shopping for clothes, or you need to have a bath. You know, we are flooded with all these ideas of things that this is what you need to take care of yourself, to make yourself feel better. And for me, one of the sort of layers I had to peel back was actually, well, what do I actually need? What do I need for myself? And how can I implement those on a day-to-day basis so that I am being nourished and I can, be restored physically, mentally, spiritually, and bring myself, back into the household in a position where I'm able to bring joy and help meet the needs of my children, particularly when they're really small. But sort of, it's one of those things in unschooling, isn't it? Like we've talked about, like our children know when they want to sleep, because we've always given them this environment where they're tired, they can go to sleep. We haven't told them they have to go to bed at this time and get up at that time. They know, they recognize their own hunger cues. They recognize, I'm trying to think, so they recognize my daughter's not been feeling particularly very well today, and she basically took herself to bed all day, snuggled up in bed with her teddies and watched movies, because she recognized that's what she needed, and no one had forced her out the door to go to school. My 12-year-old recognizes that he needs quite a lot of sort of alone time in his own space, and they manage that, but I think we've been told all these other things all our lives about what we need and what self-care looks like. So really examining for ourselves, do I need a glass of wine at the end of every day? Well, my personal answer is no, that's not what I need. But I need other things, maybe just 5 minutes out in the garden on my own in the fresh air.
I think that's really staying connected to yourself, isn't it, and how you're feeling. And you're right, it's much harder with small children. Mine are older now, so I've noticed that, for example, when they're all happy and they're at peace and they're doing whatever they want, I always feel this sense of lovely, and I can often just at that point I'll just do something of my own, or oftentimes what I will choose to do, which is self-care to me, is something I enjoy doing with them as well. So baking, for example, we put on classic FM and we bake, and that's always just a nice thing to say, let's, particularly if you just want to sort of change the environment up a little bit, and that's relaxing to everybody. And sometimes I need to go away, I need to be by myself, I have to have a long walk. So I like to have a long walk every day, and often I'll do that by myself because that's my kind of replenishing time. And or seeing friends right now, a walk outside with a friend, that kind of thing. And again, I think, well, I'm going away from you all for an hour, but friends matter, and they'll matter to you too, and that's okay. So and that I need that. So it's a healthy balance. But I do try to stay in touch with myself during the day. So if I feel like so I can get easily kind of overwhelmed, like if I'm sure you get this too, and everybody needs you for something, your input, there's this kind of noise that goes on, and you're helping everyone out, and that can go on for a little while, and then I just think, that's when I need my 5 minutes. So that's when I'll go to my room and I'll just be like, okay, and I'll just take 5 minutes out, and then kind of rebalance and come back. But really, to me, it's really a kind of a staying connected to what's going on. And maybe day, I absolutely need a glass of wine at the end of the day, but it might not be every day. But it's really about the little things that you bring in, little tiny things, so you don't get to Friday and you're going to explode. No, you're taking care of yourself the whole way through, because it matters, and it matters to show them that you take care of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not selfish. It's not something that if only I had time for. It's really essential. And when your children are small, it's much, much harder. Absolutely. But as they grow, I think that it's a really healthy, getting that balance right. It's really good for everybody.
I can remember when my children were small, when I first started sort of taking a daily shower on my own, and it had probably been years since I'd done that, and like the first couple of times I'd done it, the first couple of times I did it, I can remember thinking, wow, this is amazing, this is what I need. It's like 5 minutes, a shower on my own, and it was a completely different experience to, say, a shower on my own pre-children. You know, but recognizing in myself that for me was really important. It helped, you know, apart from feeling fresh and clean, it helped, you know, and I realized that actually I needed that in the mornings. That helped sort of, you know, awaken me maybe to the day, and just realizing those things about yourself, like that works for me. I like to take a shower in the morning, and that being part of your self-care routine.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always do. So I try to meditate a little bit in the morning as well, or I find those moments during the day, walking always. And then recently, so since last September probably, I've started sea swimming, which is wonderful. Not right now because it's really cold. Not this week. We did go last week, and that's just really fun, really kind of exhilarating. And you know, the children have got no desire to do that whatsoever. And again, it's my thing. I think it's really healthy to have things beyond the home, and I have a lot of things outside of the house that I'm interested in, projects that I, you know, or work projects that I'm involved in. And I think that for me, and not necessarily for everybody, but I really need that. It kind of keeps my balance and keeps me grounded in who I am as this individual person. I'm not just, you know, I'm their mother, and I am this person with all these different interests. And I think that keeping tabs on that and nurturing that is important. Sometimes it feels like there isn't enough time in the day, obviously. But I was talking to a friend recently, and she was saying how their best times, and I totally get this, and I totally agree, when you're almost like a co-working space, and you're all together, and everyone's doing the things that they're interested in, and you maybe just, you know, show someone something that you're doing, someone pops in to show you what they're doing, someone offers a cup of tea, and that to me is we often have that, and it's just really lovely, and it's just it's a really kind of special space when we have that, and everyone just getting on with their own thing. And so we have quite a lot of that time now.
It's my husband bringing me tea, talking of self-care. So
Brilliant. I'm gonna have a little bit of
yes, tea slurp.
Yum.
Yeah, I think that it is also really beneficial for our children to see us with our own interests, to see us going through that process of learning, to see us going through you know, all the things that entails. So, you know, researching stuff, reading stuff, being excited about something, trying new things out, getting things wrong. You know, and it's really it's a really good, it adds a dynamic to the family when that happens, because like you say, when they're small, there isn't so much time for this idea that you should have your own interests and you should be doing your own thing. Well, I say that, you know, I had 4 small children. It was really full on. It was really busy, and I didn't really have time other than for, you know, putting food on the table and getting some clean clothes and, you know, doing some arts and crafts and sort of playing with the children. Beyond that, there wasn't much time for things until they became more independent. And then I started saying, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? You know, first it was like 5 minutes, you know, what am I going to do with this 5 minutes I've got here, this 10 minutes I've got there? And then that time expanded, a bit like you were saying earlier. Actually, sometimes it's really all or nothing. Sometimes I've got 4 children who are all doing their own thing in their own space, and then I have 4 children who are all, I need you now for this, right? Different things, and you're suddenly plate spinning. But there is more time now for me to do my own things, and I think it's really lovely that our children get to see that they get to see us going through those learning processes as well, and they see that there are things in life that I don't know about and that I'm finding out about, and even more recently there's been things that I don't know about that I've actually gone to my children and said, I know that you have some experience of this, could you just come and help me a little bit? You come and, which again I think is a really lovely, healthy dynamic to have in a family.
Well, you can bring your whole person to it if you're not scared of showing who you are. They know the things that they know more about than I do. They make fun of me often because they, I'm going to say particularly history, and there are certain things where they absolutely run circles around me, and or just but yeah, those real life things that we're engaged in, or that are struggles, or that are hard, or didn't work out, or they have worked out, or they're fun, or they're not, and kind of bringing that to the table and being honest about what's happening. I think just a really beautiful opportunity for everybody to sort of to learn and to understand each other. And absolutely, it means you're there as your full person. Obviously, you're the parent, of course, but you're also showing it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay sometimes, but you're still okay. Like all of those things. And also they can they can be there for you as well when you need them too. And they always, if they think that I'm feeling sad, or they'll always say, hey, you okay, would like a cup of tea? They take care of me too, and it's just a natural thing that's sort of come about.
I think you can't afford to be anything but authentic when you're with your children all the time, because I think the idea that you would be able to, or that it was achievable for you to be put on this sort of perfect parent persona for your own children in your own house, when you are present with them 24/7, would be damaging to you yourself, but be doing a disservice to your children as well, because I think that I'm going to use that word healthy again. I think it's healthy for them to realise that, or to know that you are like a genuine human being, and that they're not having to achieve some ideal adult goal, that and I think realistically as well, if you are genuinely able to make mistakes and own those mistakes and apologize for those mistakes, that also actually enables your children to go through that same process. It was a mistake, I admit that I made that mistake, I apologize for that mistake. There's less sort of less shame attached to that whole process as well, if you remove this sort of adult ideal perfect scenario.
I mean, that's a lot of the learning that they're doing. And the word learning is it's just a funny word, that the way they're living, or the things that they are understanding about the world. I think the healthiest things come from this, and we all know that later on in life you're going to do okay in the world if you have self-knowledge, if you have a resilience, if you have an ability to forgive yourself, if you follow, you're good at following your own, like what interests you, you have passions. We know actually what makes people happy, and it's not really acquiring a lot of knowledge in a short amount of time for a specific purpose. It's much deeper than that. It's much deeper than that, and I think that those things, our children really have a lot of time to be able to yeah, to be acquiring all of those skills and all of that knowledge.
I mean, one of the things I love about unschooling is that my children know what their needs are. My son knows that he needs a lot of downtime. He knows that his work to rest ratio is considerably different to my work to rest ratio, you know, and he also knows, he recognizes in himself when he's had enough. If we are out and about, he is able to say, I need to go and sit in the car now.
Yeah, that's, you know,
right. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And those things are really important. I can't, you know, to force yourself to push through that feeling that you're done, you know, to push through that moment of overwhelm, or that, you know, whatever it is detrimental to your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Anyway, I'll finish up now. So we have talked a lot about our unschooling journey, particularly how unschooling has impacted us personally, and obviously our reflections on self-care and the importance of us considering ourselves in the family unit. I'd really think that we could talk more about self-care. Maybe I would like to invite you again to talk about specifically about self-care in unschooling families. So thank you for joining me today. People listening can join me again in the next episode of Unschooling Conversations, which I will be releasing next month on the 16th. Right, it was lovely. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I hope the recording goes well.
Speak soon.